Yeah, but we'll actually have to look into the camera for a change, I guess. Thanks, Sasha.
He said, fourth wall break.
Yeah. So, do you want me to start or do you?
Welcome back to the Casting Cost cEDH podcast. I'm Blake.
And I'm Chase. And today we're going to be breaking down and looking at the top 10 commanders. All right, so today we're kind of going through and we're looking at the top 10 commanders based on the EDH top 16. And you know, before we got on here, we started talking about how we're going to break this down by the popular commanders, and seeing as though there's not a whole lot of data, you know, talked about trying to maybe do it for the past month, you know, kind of going into this new year that we're in now. And we're doing it based on settings of all commanders that have been reported in tournaments, and then all tournament size. You know, it doesn't matter if it's 20 plus, 60 plus, things like that. And so starting off at number 10, Najeela the Blade Blossom.
Okay. I think Najeela's hurting right now, man. I feel bad for her, but I don't know. Najeela used to be one of those decks that was like inevitable. Like if you could stop the win cons that the deck had, then she was just going to beat you down. But I think where we're in a much I think where we're in a much more like creature heavy meta right now, it's hard for her to actually connect with the warriors and the 1/1s that she's making, and also herself. And then on top of that, like I feel like her inevitability has slowly went away, because I feel like there's a lot of decks that are very inevitable right now. Like if you just give them time, they're going to get there. So I don't know. I think that she's just hurting right now.
Right. No, and as far as like 5-color commander goes, you know, she's not bad, she's not awful, she's not in the greatest position, kind of like what you're saying, you know. And I think a lot of that has to do with when we're looking at what, at least in my experience in playing against Najeela, you know, I've noticed like two kind of main things or game plans people go for, you know, and it's either they go for the kind of the more combat centric build with Najeela, where they're playing like the Derevi to get the untapped triggers. I think I forgot off the top of my head what it is, but the Samut, that whenever a creature connects, it allows you to draw cards. The last event I played in, like Professional Facebreaker is like a huge card in that deck now, just to get some more triggers off of what you're connecting with and making some treasures and keeping the momentum going. But then you also have the other kind of build of it where it is more of like a turbo Adnos deck, and you're going for like the breach lines and Thassa's Oracles and things like that. And where I feel like where you're saying like it kind of has tapered off and, you know, isn't back up to the same level it was before, you know, it's missing some of those components after following the bans and whatnot. And I'm not going to revisit all that. But I think in particular cards like Dockside, that is a card that allowed that deck to kind of have both game plans going. Whereas what you're saying, the way the format is right now, where it's really creature based and like even your creature combo based, even with some of the decks we're going to be talking about later in this, it's harder to connect. It's harder to get through at times unless you really go heavily into that game plan, but then it takes you off of the other part. Or you can go more of the 5-color good stuff route and go less into the, you know, the Najeela plan and maybe have it as somewhat of a backup or a value engine. But I agree with you. I think in the way the meta has kind of shifted and the way the format currently is, especially with like some of our, especially when we get into like the top 5 of today's episode, like it's harder to just connect.
Well, and also I feel like if you're just playing 5-color good stuff Najeela, there's honestly, just in my opinion, there's better options than just Najeela, because again, like I don't know. Like, she was kind of one of those decks where she could really thrive early on. Like, if you could get down an early Nagila, start attacking, start overwhelming the board, and you're starting to like generate advantage because again, if you have like Derevi out, you're going to start untapping stuff. I mean, it's inevitable, but the later the game goes, the more the boards are established, and also people are seeing more cards. You're going to have more people just targeting Nagila to kill her. So it's a very commander-centric backup plan, whereas even if you just drop a color, I still feel like you're probably better off having a better like value engine in the zone, or an actual like a combo piece that's easier to combo with, rather than, hey, I've got to get Wooburg and I've got to be dueling damage and I've also need this other thing and this other thing. Like, it just starts to turn into something that's a little too difficult to try and assemble all of those pieces.
Right. Well, and you brought up a good point there as far as like as it pushes into the later game. Obviously, the format is slowed down, and like even some of our turbo decks now, you know, maybe before you wouldn't see Rogsai playing as much of like a Psych Rift or a Toxic Deluge or a Fire Covenant or things like that. But I think as the meta has shifted to this more creature heavy build, and either your control decks or the decks that are suited well to grind into that mid to late game, you're going to see those cards. And those are cards that are going to be disrupting that Nagila game plan the whole time. You know, I know in the tournament that I went to at the end of the year, like this one Nagila player, he was popping off, and you know, I was able to resolve a Cutzel on board like really early on. So going in my turn, I was like, overload a Psych Rift. And then after that, I silenced him like 2 turns in a row with a Ranger Captain and a silence. So that way he couldn't get his board presence back. And I was able to present a win from there. But that's kind of what I'm saying is like, you know, those pieces are finding more and more slots in even some of our faster decks to handle some of this late game stuff. And I think that, you know, Nagila is going to be something that gets pushed farther down the list just because of that.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And also, it was kind of the same thing of, I talked about it in one of the other episodes, but I feel like the less commander-centric focus you can put on the deck, like obviously it's good to have it as an option, but that's what it should be, as like an option. If you build the deck around Nagila and then for some reason you can't get access to Nagila, like a Dranith or something shutting her off, or you get her out and then she's dead, and now you got to get enough mana to recast her, and it's just slowing you down. You're going way too hard into this strategy. I feel like it's just, to me, it's not smart right now. So I think a lot of other people are noticing that. That's why we're seeing like less representation of it.
Well, and you know, kind of even going back to what we opened up with as far as the 5-color commander stuff. You know, we're going to be talking about another one later on in the episode, but like, you know, I think Kenrith to some extent has made a little bit of a resurgence, just because like, you know, with Hermit Druid, like being able to do lines like that, like Kenrith players have been able to kind of revitalize that deck to some extent. You know, towards the end of the year, we started seeing Asika being a 5-color option as well, you know, and as far as like a very pure, like 5-color value where you don't have to utilize your commander, but hey, if you want to get if you're playing Dorks and turn 2, you can cast your commander and then you know, start casting some of the other legendaries like Lotho or things like that in the deck. Why not play that? You know, if you just want to go for a 5-color good stuff build, that seems like a solid option as well. But again, it's not the commander centric stuff like what you're talking about there with Nagila.
Yep. I don't really have anything else to say about Nagila.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else on that, and maybe I'm stalling because the next one makes me a little bit nervous because I've seen it, I've played against it, I still don't know how it works sometimes. And that at number 9 is Magda Brazen Outlaw.
So it is Magda now.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, like I said, I used to think I knew how that deck won, which I know that you can do. Would you say Clock of Omens? Is that right?
Yes, I believe so. The one that allows you to tap artifacts to untap another artifact and things like that. Yeah.
Well, and I know, like, so I know there's like ways you can go like Clock of Omens, and if you have the it's the guy like the Roaming Throne and stuff like that, you start to double your Magda activations. And technically with that, you can tap stuff down to then double your activations because it itself is a dwarf, but it's also an artifact. So then you can tap it and a treasure down to make 2 treasures, and then you untap a treasure. And then at that point, you can start tapping down it and a treasure, and you'll always net a treasure that's untapped. So eventually you have infinite mana, and you've created this crazy loop to where now Magda has all these treasures that she can go and basically get whatever she wants out of the deck. But then I don't remember what card specifically finishes in that. I just know that eventually you get to something that you can sink mana or sink something into it, and it will essentially like burn the whole table out. Or you can make like infinite, like you said, like hasty creatures that will still kill the whole table. So it's like it's gonna win, but it just, like I said, it just basically needs to count to 5.
Yeah, and you know, being able to take advantage of all these low cost creatures, and like, you know, being able to play things like the Springleaf Drum, or like even the vehicles like the Clown Car and things like that, to take advantage as part of that game plan. Like, I feel like where we just talked about Najeela and we're talking about the commander centric stuff, like you don't want to dive too much in that game plan. This is another deck where you kind of have to do that, but I think it does a more effective job and has a lot more synergies to where it can, you know, you can kind of build it in different ways. And that might, I don't know if that's necessarily a downfall or not, because I've seen stacks builds for it where, you know, they might try to throw stacks pieces in there to either slow down the board, or, you know, things like Portal to Phyrexia to try to like get board wipes and get more value off your opponent's stuff. Like, you know, I think that this is going to be a deck that probably sees a lot of change, but still keeps that core like plan of, we're going to play a bunch of dwarfs, we're going to play a bunch of artifacts. Maybe even whenever they release more stuff for Aether Drift, you know, I think people are hyping up some, like even some of the vehicles that have been spoiled so far, to be like, okay, is this going to be a Magda card? Is this going to be something that gets us there a little bit more, or find some new game plans in that? But, you know, whether it's the dragons, artifacts, I don't know enough about this deck to really put that much input on, and it's not one for me in particular that like interests me enough to even play it, though, especially since red seems to be kind of the weaker color at the moment.
I think that red's in a weird spot because, well, I don't want to say weird spot. I think red's actually it's in a weird spot whenever you put it into a lot of different decks, but for some reason, whenever it comes to like monocolor decks, red just seems to do well, like Godo, Magda, things like that.
That's true.
I feel like you see a lot of mono red decks and strategies that pop up, even stuff like Slicer, or now like the new Alexios, stuff like that. So you still have mono red strategies that can succeed, but I think that the benefit that Magda has over Najeela is that some Najeela pilots play it as 5-color good stuff, when I think it's almost bad at that. And then you could pick a different commander for that and not have to play the 5-color good stuff, or not have to play Najeela, which if you love Najeela, then obviously like you're probably going to want to play more into the Najeela plan. But I feel like right now Najeela's in a bad spot to play into the Najeela plan, so you almost should be playing it as 5-color good stuff. So it's kind of like a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Right. Whereas Magda pilots play into Magda, like that's how the deck wins. And the difference between something like Najeela to Magda is Magda costs less. She nets treasures so even if you're not using it to like win the game right then, you're getting some sort of advantage off of it. And every single time you attack with a dork, or like your dwarves, immediately you are getting, I mean, if she needs 5, so I mean, you're 25 or 20% closer to winning the game essentially every single time you attack. Doesn't even have to make contact, you just have to attack with it.
Right.
So, and a lot of times they're coming down very early because they're just little 1-drops, and I mean, there's going to be somebody open. So again, it doesn't matter how they attack. I mean, and also it has that benefit of like, you don't really have to attack it. You can crew them, you can do all sorts of different shenanigans, but everybody is really playing into the Magda. They're not playing red color, red deck good stuff. Like that's not what they're doing. They're saying we're playing Magda, so everybody is like, they're the cohesion of, we are gonna do Magda. So I feel like the pilots for the deck, I feel like the pilots for the deck, when they're working together, they're all in. Everybody's all in on, Magda, like we're doing the Magda plan. So then all of this brain power is going towards make Magda better at the Magda plan. Whereas with Najeela, it's like, half and half. It's like some of the pilots are like, no, Najila good stuff. And the other people are like, no, Najila combat beats. And then everybody's like, no, and then they've drawn their line in the sand, and it's almost setting it back, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like Magda has a plan. She's sticking to the plan, and she's pretty good at it in the right hands. Like, obviously not in our hands, but in the right hands. And on top of that, she has access to some pretty powerful Staxy effects like Magus of the Moon, Blood Moon, things like that, where that would just shut me out of a game.
Well, and and we haven't even mentioned some of the other cards like the Adaptive Automaton and the Universal Automaton and things like that. I think you mentioned Roaming Throne a little bit ago, but we haven't mentioned those things. But you did bring up I think a good point, and I was going to kind of maybe segue a little bit into something else. But when you brought up like using the dwarves to just go into combat and swing, where we did talk about this format being very creature heavy and like creature combo heavy and things like that, unless you're running like a Tymna deck and you're trying to get some card advantage, and obviously like Najila, that's the main plan. But at cEDH level, you're not seeing a whole lot of people just swinging, right? Unless there's a reason, like a Ragavan or Tymna triggers or whatever else. But like typically the creatures on board are there for a reason, and it's not usually for combat. At least with this, you can, like you're saying, going heavy into that game plan and being able to not only generate treasures, but you might be able to swing at someone and keep them off Adnaz or Necropotence or things like that. Or you might be able to swing at someone playing like a really green heavy deck that they just don't want to lose their dorks, and be able to swing through and get advantage off of that. And I guess where I was going to segue just briefly while we're still on Magda is that I feel like that is a play style that is really good for people that are either coming from casual or a high power mindset into cEDH. Because I think at the lower power tables, you do see a lot of combat. cEDH, not as much, but I think that Magda is also kind of solidified itself. Like, obviously, you have to learn all the lines, but I think that is a really good deck for someone that wants to either keep things a little bit more budgeted or is somewhat new into the format, but it fits what they're used to playing as well.
No, I definitely I do agree with you. Like what you were just saying, that I think that Magda's just in a weird, I don't know how to, Magda is in a weird spot because again, it's just a monocolored deck, and all monocolored decks are going to have that. If you could build a just good stuff monocolored deck, then there would really be no need to have to splash in these other colors. But obviously the deck, it has to play some bad cards, and it has to play some very commander specific cards. And I mean, we've seen games where you get them off the Magda and it's over. And a lot of Magda pilots, I've learned this the hard way, but a lot of them are playing a ton of removal specifically for that problem. I played in a game where Magda collectively, it was 2 Magda pilots, and Magda was collectively cast 11 times during that game.
Oh my God.
Because they were all on, they were both playing a ton of removal because, we've had games where I've Storm Draked or Gilded Drake somebody's Magda and be like, I'm just going to keep you off the Magda plan. Well, they're like, no, none of that. And they literally just killed each other's Magda over and over and over. And there were people casting Magda for 14 mana because they need the Magda plan. But they didn't have any problem getting there because guess what? Magda's making treasures like crazy.
Right. So
they have all this mana, and it's just, you just have to figure out what to do with it. So I definitely think it's a deck that, again, it is just kind of inevitable. If you don't address the Magda early, she can go very fast and combo out and win. And she can also play into the later game. She can kind of just sit there and not be the biggest threat. She can just, kind of lay low and just play into that mid range and just, hold up some removal, hold up a little bit of this, and then just win out of nowhere at instant speed. It's like, oh, put an activation. You play Sisay. It's like you wait until somebody does something stupid or they tap out and you're like, oh, cool, activation.
Right.
And Magda's good at that plan. So I definitely think Magda's way better than Najila. Not to hate on Najila pilots, because I like Najila. I think Najila is actually a really cool deck. I actually built a Najila deck for one of my buddies who's getting into cEDH because I thought that it was a good way for him to kind of get that intro. Hey, I want you to see what the good cards look like. This also has a combat beats plan if you absolutely need to do it. So this feels like the step from casual to the next thing. And I even saw, I think it was Lamora's Cards, where they or maybe it wasn't Lemore's cards. It was Scry Babies. Ian was on there with them, and they were doing like a getting into cEDH type thing. And he was like, I think Najeela is a really good deck for new pilots getting into cEDH. And so I immediately was like, too easy. I built the deck, and it's got a plan, and it's going to try its best. And again, it's, just depending on what you run into, you'll do
Najeela or Magda?
Najeela.
Okay.
I don't think Magda's good for any new pilot.
See, and that's where I'm kind of the opposite on that, because I feel like, even though maybe some of the lines are very complicated, and obviously, like we've addressed in multiple episodes now, neither one of us really understand it. But I think that from a standpoint of like, if you're wanting to build something that is like cost efficient and has a plan and has a lot of resiliency, as well as it's probably about to get a lot of support, I think that is a good deck to get into. And if you're having to kind of switch, like even some of our pilots here locally, if they wanted to go from a lower budget bracket with Magda into, this is the top tier Magda deck, there's not a lot of missing parts. And so I think it's one of those decks where where Najeela or Sisay or some of these 4-color piles where you kind of have to have all those pieces in order to play it. Magda's not that way. And part of that is because of, it being monocolor, but a lot of it I think has to do with you aren't spending a lot on the pieces that make the deck efficient.
That's fair. I think the one thing that I would worry about, I guess, with a Magda plan, I don't like locking people into monocolored decks because then, even though it is cheap, you've invested a ton into this like one color. So sometimes you can get locked into that, but then you find like, oh, I don't really like this color. Like I was very fortunate that I started with a 3-color deck. If I wanted to pivot, I could just pull a couple cards and be like, okay, I'm not going to play these ones. I can play these ones. Like that's fine. But so that would be like, I guess the only bad thing. But I mean, if you're just trying to get into it to learn anyways, like I guess I could see that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, you're going to cast these bad boys. You're going to attack. And you're just going to not let Magda die.
Yeah.
Or if she does die, just recast her.
And hopefully there's going to be people in the comments that tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So tell me I'm wrong. Prove me wrong. Yeah. But anyway.
I think Magda being at number 9.
Huh?
I think Magda being at number 9 proves you wrong. No.
Maybe.
I don't know. That's actually pretty good. I mean, 9's pretty good. That's actually really good.
It's really good for a mono. It's our only monocolor deck in the top 10.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, unless you're like just really wanting to talk more about Magda, our number 8. Never again. That's as much as we'll talk about on the channel. But our number 8 is another very artifact-centric commander.
Other Magda.
Other Magda. Yeah, it's Magda 2.0 actually. Now, and it's more of your bread and butter because it's your favorite color combination.
Tivit.
Yeah, it's Tivit.
Okay.
Seller of Secrets.
I got you. Okay. I actually really this is gonna sound really crazy, but I really think Tivit is a good deck. I actually like Tivit quite a bit. I like the combo centricness in the zone. I like the fact that when he comes down, he immediately does something, even though like you're not attacking, but you're getting treasures or clues. And I mean, like you can crack the treasures to, crack your clues to make, to like draw cards and see some advantage. You make a ton of clues. You have the ability to play the Displacer Kitten to Fairy Line while also using it as value for Tivit because you can blink the Tivit every ETB, you're getting more treasures. So there's lots of good stuff in there, and he's got built-in protection because he's so much mana. The one reason why I just don't ever build Tivit is because when you get into a pod and there's only 3 people in it, you're screwed, man. You are, because that's one less person voting, which means you're not getting enough treasures, which completely like shuts off your time sieve plan pretty much, or like you're like it's way worse. And so that's something that I mean, we were playing at Hobby one time, and that we were in a tournament, and the guy showed up with a Tivit deck to play in the tournament, and they were only able to do 3-person pods. Poor guy got demolished. And then when we all quit, like when we were all done with the tournament and we sat down for just open play games, he kicked everybody's ass. Like it was crazy.
Yeah.
But he just couldn't get it going because it's just not, it's tough whenever you run into situations like that. And I just don't ever want to leave it up to chance like that. I don't ever want to roll up to a tournament and be like, oh, this guy didn't show up. Y'all can just play. And I'll be like, fuck. But other than that, I think Tivit's really good. And I just like Esper. You know, I'm kind of the resident Esper player.
Fair enough.
Like, they're gonna see a ton of Esper out of me.
I really thought that you said the one downside. I thought you were gonna say that the artwork is ass.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that talk about the artwork looking like shit. I don't think it does really. I think it looks fine. Like I don't think it's not the nicest thing. You know, he's not like a Phyrexian, like cool, crazy, dark artwork, or you know, like a Keurig or something like that. But at the same time, like he's not. I don't think it's that bad.
Yeah. No, my thoughts on Tivit. I think he's really good. You know, even in a previous video, I said that I felt like by maybe throughout the course of 2025 or by the end of the year, he's probably going to end up making his way in the top 5. You know, because I think Esper is really strong right now. You know, Tivit, even though you brought up like a lot of upside as far as the value he brings in, the beats plan, you know, hard to remove, like things like that. This is a deck you don't have to play him to.
Yeah,
because you're playing the Thoracle lines within it. I mean, I think that even though we've talked about this more so for Zur before, you could probably play some lines where you're stealing other people's things. I don't know if you'd do that in this per se, but like, you know, it's still in that Esper shell. You have a lot of control. You can push into the mid to late game very effectively. You're getting a lot of card draw. Like, you know, I think that not just with Tivit, but like even Atraxa, whenever again, I'm going to go back to the bans, but that was the discussion then of like, how do people play these 6-7 drop commanders? I think that Tivit, there's no issue there because, you know, yeah, you might be casting for 6, but the moment you do, you're instantly getting value once he resolves. You can, you know, if depending on the point in the game, if you're going the displacer lines, most people are going to do treasures anyway instead of doing the clues because they're not going to want to give you the card draw at that point. And so that way, if they do remove him somehow, you're always generating the mana to bring him back. He, you know, unlike Atraxa, Tivit is a 2-card combo just from the command zone with Time Sieve. You know, and you were talking about that game plan of just going on the beats, and then, you know, the example you gave with the guy that came in and you're in a 3-person pod, but if you're in that full pod and you got Time Sieve and you're getting all those extra turns and you're going off, it's really hard to stop that gameplay.
Yeah.
You know, unless someone gets lucky and either like Besages the Time Sieve to interrupt the combat steps, or you know, just things like that. Now, I will say this: you do have to be aware of what you're doing when you're playing Tivit. You know, it's kind of like the opposite of whenever a table is trying to figure out how to play Slicer, because whenever you're sitting down with a person playing Slicer, everyone has to work together to figure out how you're going to do the swings in order to make sure that the table survives through the turns. With Tivit, you kind of have to do the same thing when you're piloting him, is that you can't just start targeting one player and try to do the, you know, kill him through commander damage that way. You have to be very methodical and thinking about what you're doing before you do it. So that way you can kind of continue that loop and making sure that you're getting the votes and things like that. You know, and I think that you brought up one combo that I would say is really good in resolving some of that issue as far as the 3-man pods at tournaments, because sometimes that's inevitable. And I think that's the Displacer Kitten and Teferi line. I just think that that's a very clean line. It's super. I'm not going to say it's easy to resolve, but when you're already playing a commander that wants to take advantage of Displacer Kitten and you have a couple of other silence effects in there, it's not like you're in a 4th color and the rest of your slots are tight. So being able to put Teferi in there and being able to use that as a win line to eventually get Thassa's out and win, I think is a really solid plan for whenever you're in those situations piloting this deck.
Yeah. Well, and also I think that, like we talked about in one of our other videos, but I do think that by losing Jeweled Lotus and losing Crypt and losing these other cards, it made Tivit actually lean more into like Esper control, whereas people just think that they've got to, like, I don't understand why people do this. I guess I get it, but people would just mulligan to like, turn 1, turn 2, turn 3 Tivit. And it's like, that's great, but what are you doing after that? because like people aren't just gonna forever let it stick around on the table. You know what I mean? Like eventually it will run away with the game. I was watching a gameplay video the other day where somebody did cast a Fire Covenant, and there was somebody that was playing like they were playing like Thrasios plan, and the Thrasios player was like, yeah, like, no, I get it. You're going to kill Thrasios. Like, I understand. And that guy was actually going to try and win on his turn. But they were like, you need to kill the Tivit too. And he was like, well, I'm not really worried about the Tivit. And then they let the Tivit stick around. And then, of course, Tivit player's turn comes around and they win the game. And it is a deck that, like I said, as soon as and that's one thing I wish Zer was better about, is like the moment he comes down, I got to get a whole turn cycle before I get anything out of him. So he's just kind of there as like a plan. You know, again, he's not the main plan. He's just there as an option. But it kind of almost feels like, I don't know, this kind of sounds stupid, but I would rather the extra like blue pip to have to cast Zer rather than cast Tymna, simply for the fact that like Tymna comes down, I swing, maybe I get a card. Zer comes down, I necro, I get a shit ton of cards. You know what I mean? So like him being a little more of a target, I'm a little more okay with it. Like it's worth it. It's not great, but it's okay. But like Tivit comes down, it should sound the alarm for everybody. Like, we've got to address this like now, or else, I mean, this deck it's going to do its thing. But yeah, I'm glad that people have gotten away from just slam Tivit as early as possible. Instead, now it's like, okay, no, we're going to look and we're going to make sure we're going to have mana saved up. We're going to play Tivit at a responsible time. We're going to make sure that we can interact with the rest of the table still. And then maybe they're playing Tivit and they're going to try and go for it about the same time. It's like, okay, boom, like you're playing the deck right. You're not just slamming him and he's just sitting on the table for 4, 5, 6 turns, just being like, well, he's just kind of here. I don't have the time save yet. And it's like, why did you play him? Like,
right.
Cool, you got some treasures or clues or whatever, but then like it got removed and now you have an 8 mana Tivit sitting in the zone. Like, yeah. Or it gets stolen. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. So I'm glad. I think that people are starting to play that deck more. They're being more responsible when playing that deck. So I'm happy to see that.
I think it made me think of this whenever you were talking about that, is that I think that whenever you are in an Esper shell, I think that whether it be just like most commanders or the play style within that color combination, I think it tends to be a lot more reactive than proactive. And him being in the command zone allows you to kind of flip that switch into the proactive side of things. And you know, if one part of the game plan isn't going, or just the game in general isn't moving, you got options. You know, whereas, you know, some of your other decks right now, I feel like even if it's like an Esper like partner pairing, yeah, like a Tymna Malcolm or things like that, I feel like people will still they'll try to do Tymna triggers or Malcolm triggers to get some, like, accrue some kind of value there. But sometimes it leads to nothing. Whereas with Tivit, the more proactive you can be with him, it seems like you're always going to get something out of there to progress your own game state.
Well, and also, I mean, we're in a meta where, we're in a game like cEDH. We're in a meta where artifacts are very prevalent. There's plenty of good artifacts in the deck. So having all these artifact tutors in your deck, I mean, it's not really bad. Like, even if you're not going to go Tivit right now, I mean, you can still do something with the artifact tutors. It's not bad to build your deck a little bit around that plan. Whereas with like a Tymna Malcolm, I mean, you're going pretty heavy into like getting your little pirates out and trying to swing to get some treasures. And it's like, Tivit comes down, you probably are going to get 2 treasures, 3 clues. Well, then there you go. Like, you've already made up the difference. And on top of that, like, you kind of, it's tough to go Tymna and Malcolm at the same time. You almost have to go like Tymna, then Malcolm, or Malcolm, then Tymna. Because, like, I mean, you probably should go Malcolm, then Tymna, but they're both 3-drop commanders. So they're not, you're probably not going to be able to bring them down on the same turn. You're going to have to go one after the other. And then if Malcolm gets killed and shut down, you have these little 1/1 pirates, or like these little 1-drop pirates or 2-drop pirates that are just sitting in your deck. You've built very heavily around the strategy. And I mean, if you get shut off too from your commanders, like, they're just kind of useless.
Yeah.
Like, it's really useless. Whereas even if you do get shut off from Tivit, you still got the Thassa Oracle, console package, which you do still have in that deck too. But then you have a lot of ways to get out good artifacts like Wish Claws, things like your One Ring, stuff like that are still going to be good artifacts, or copy artifact, things like that. So you're still fine. Like, you're playing a good game instead of just leaning so hard into the commander. It's just, like you said, it's an opportunity to be reactive be proactive rather than reactive.
Right. Well, and you just said there too, between Timna and Malcolm, it's 3 apiece, right? You're still spending 6. So why not just play the Tivit that gets you there a little bit more?
Yeah. Well, think about it. You play Malcolm, and then he comes down. And then the next turn you play Timna, and you swing with Malcolm, and you get a treasure and maybe a card. Tivit comes down.
If Tivit comes down 6, you're getting at least 2 treasures.
Yeah.
Because you're probably voting treasure for yourself.
You get 3 clues.
3 clues.
And then the next turn he's attacking again, and now you have 4 treasures and 6 clues.
Yeah, like
it's pretty good.
You're accruing a lot more throughout that. So, any other thoughts on Tivit before we kind of move on to the next one?
Other than that, I love Esper now. I think Esper's good, man. Esper plus a color.
That's the way to
go. Oh, for sure. For sure.
Oh, so all right. Well, for number, I think 7. Yeah, we're on our 7th one now. Going backwards. We're dropping a color on this one.
2 color.
We're going into 2 color. Can you guess which one it is?
Let me think. Well, I'm gonna take a wild guess. Let me think. Okay, 7, and it's a 2 color deck. Is one of the colors blue?
Yeah.
One of the colors is blue. I don't think it'd still be doing that good. Is it like Karkashima?
No.
Not Karkashima. So it's blue. There's no fucking way it's like Plagon or something, is it?
No, not Plagon.
Like, what?
I don't feel like there's been enough Plagon action to make it into the list just yet. Take the opposite direction.
Opposite of Plagon? Like Talion? Or
you're in the right colors now.
Really?
Yeah, not Talion.
What other fucking blue-black commander?
So,
Yuriko?
At number 7, we were talking about Yuriko, the Tiger's Shadow.
This deck sucks. I fucking hate Yuriko, dude. Why would you look? I just want to. Okay, look. I'm not trying to be an ass. I'm not. I promise I'm not. But like, it's the same thing of like, why play a commander that deals damage based off power in a format where everything we play is like low CMC, and then you draw for your turn, and it's like, if I draw for my turn and I draw my Necropotence, okay, cool. I don't have to cast Zur. I can just like cast the Necropotence. I'm still playing good cards. If I draw Phyrexian Unlife, that's probably like the most dead card that I can draw in that deck. But then, like, once it's in my hand, it's like, okay, well, this card's out of the way. All the other stuff's going to be pretty, like, decent value stuff. Everything else is fine. But, like, in Yuriko, it's like, congratulations. You fucking drew your Shadow of Mortality or whatever. It's a 15 drop. What are you going to do? You're going to fucking play, like, what is the Brainstorm to put it on top and then deal 15? Like, what?
Yeah, that Yuriko, to me, I think this is another deck that kind of like Magda that we talked about earlier. It really has to go heavy into whatever its game plan is. You're playing a bunch of these 1-drops, like as far as, can't be blocked, or maybe even sometimes like menace creatures that can kind of evade, or like, I guess technically, like if a deck wanted to play Dolphy in this, has Shadow, can only be blocked by Shadow. So you're going into that game plan. It's already in really strong colors. Mm-hmm. You can go the Thoracle route, but this deck, I always compare Yuriko to like a Boros aggro deck, mm-hmm. where, even though you're in the Dimir color scheme, it is the polar opposite, I feel like, of what Dimir typically does. Mm-hmm. Now, again, it might be another deck that either newer players into the format, they might look at and pick up and go, okay, well, it plays potentially the strongest like combo out of the Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation and, things like that. But it also, it's not that cost efficient, or it's not that expensive to build. So that, I think, is an upside to it. But with what you're saying as far as like the flips and like trying to build the deck in a certain way, it does, when you're going into that game plan, like you can't really be upset, I feel like, whenever the deck is doing what it's supposed to do and you're not flipping off the top what you're wanting.
Yeah.
And I think that I was watching mind sculptors, and Cal had talked about that the other day, where, or at least in the video I watched, where like a lot of these Euro pilots, like they'll start flipping and it's like, oh, a land. Oh, there's a Mox Amber. Oh, there's this little 1-drop that I've put into the deck to make it actually function. And now I'm at this state in the game where I'm mad about it because I want to hit the big stuff. And so, even if the deck does well with trying to do that top deck manipulation stuff, whether that be cards like the Brainstorm, like you're talking about, Sensei's Top, maybe, or even like Limduel's Vault, I think it
that card's
plays.
Bad, but yeah.
Does it play that at times
Yes.
still? Yeah, those can be options, obviously, in order to try to make that game plan work. But again, like if you're in the colors of Dimir, why not play something that's a little bit stronger into the Dimir game plan? And so, I think as the year progresses, I think Yuriko is going to be one of those decks that, even though people thought that it picked up like a lot of value and a lot of stock whenever the bans happen, I think as more events happen throughout this year, it's probably going to fall off of the list.
Well, and I could understand if you were playing Yuriko as just like value Dimir. Like if you're like, we're playing the best stuff in blue-black, we've got some ninjas that we're throwing in there or whatever it is, some changeling, shapeshifter, whatever they are, and we're going to just get the Yuriko flips. We don't care about hitting big stuff. We just want to play really good cards in the deck. And you're just, you're getting around Bowmaster because you're not drawing the card. You're flipping and just putting it in your hand. But again, like it suffers from one of those issues where people see what you got. So if you flip the Thassa's off the top, everybody goes, well, watch out for that guy. Or if you flip the console, everybody goes, look out for that guy. And if you flip the counterspell, people go, well, okay, we'll wait. And then they're just going to kill your Yuriko. They're going to try and take out your board, especially if there's a Bowmaster on board. They're going to eat your board alive. Right. And on top of that, the majority of the time that I'm playing against a Yuriko pilot, what ends up happening, and this is just my experience, so it's anecdotal, like I get it, it's not everybody's experience, but what ends up happening is that they don't respect any of the other value pieces on the table. They just cast a ton of shit for no reason because they're like, gotta establish a board, and then they just feed Heuristic Study, they feed whatever, any other Lothos, they start feeding it, and then they're just, and then the person's just draw a card, and they're like, well, it's fine, because I'll get my flip. And it's like, yeah, it's okay, but you just gave this person 5 cards. You're not gonna win with a 15-drop flip off the top. So I don't know what, like, even if you do flip it, like, that's great. Yeah, you took people out of, like, Adnan's territory, but, like, you didn't kill anybody. You know what I mean? Right. Like, everybody's still in the game. It's not you're putting a combo in the deck that's not finishing anything. Like, that wouldn't make sense. Like, if Thassa's Oracle was like, like when Thassa, when you scribe, one player loses the game. Nobody's playing Thassa's Oracle.
Right.
Nobody cares. Like, they want to win the game, and you're putting a combo in your deck that's not winning you the game outright. And a lot of the time, the way you're playing the deck is hurting your chances of winning. Because, like I said, I do feel like a lot of new pilots are driven to it because they love tribal stuff like ninjas, and they love that kind of game plan plus combat beats. But I feel like if they could just get rid of some of the, this is just my own opinion, but if they could get rid of some of the dumb cards that I think are in it, like Shadow Mortality and these other big things that have no purpose being there, then you just get rid of those cards, play Dimir really good stuff, and then just, still go in the Yuriko plan. Like, it's good for value. Like, that's totally fine. But why are you tapping out to cast your creatures and not keeping mana up and being responsible to, like, help interact with the table? Or why are you, I've got to cast this so during combat, even though I don't have any more mana, I'm just going to cast this, this Brainstorm and put this 15-drop on top, and it's going to set this person down to 13 life. Woo! All I got to do is find another way to top deck this thing, and then they're dead, and it's like, yeah, now you've made yourself a problem because you just hit everybody. It's kind of a hard deck to politic with because you're flipping stuff off the top and you're hurting everyone. It's like a Vial Smasher type thing. Like, it's at random. You're not... How are you going to be friends with somebody and be like, hey, me and you should work together to stop this guy who's about to win, and then I just ping you for 15 in the face? You're probably going to be like, dude, fuck you. I'm not doing that. So I think that the deck, I understand. I think that the reason the deck does so well is because there's a lot of people that really like tribal strategies, and you're going to have a ton of people that want to play that way. And again, if you just stay loyal to a deck, eventually you will get better with the deck, for sure. But I just think it's a bad deck. Nothing against anybody. Zer's bad. I'm okay with admitting it. But I just don't think that deck's good. I clearly have unresolved issues with that deck.
I was about to say, I feel like you've been holding on to that for a while. Like,
yeah.
do you feel better now
I love listening to the Mind Sculptors
that
just
out there?
shit on Yuriko. Every time Cal does it and I read the comment sections and people are like, meh, I'm like, oh my God. It makes me so happy. I'm like, that's right.
Well, maybe to not necessarily validate or like, you know, play devil's advocate or anything like that with the deck, but I think that's why I compared it more to Boros.
Yeah.
You know, we just talked about with Tivit how in the Esper shell, I think most of the time people play reactive as opposed to trying to play progressive with the deck. Even though you're dropping a color and you're in blue-black, historically that has also been a more reactive color combination as opposed to trying to progress your board state and things like that. The more you try to be reactive, I think in Yuriko, you're not doing the game plan that Yuriko is trying to do. So it's trying to go just balls to the wall, like, you know, all gas, no ass kind of set up.
Yeah.
And get there, which is, you know, again, it does kind of create these game actions where it's like, okay, you can do that, but if you were just getting the shit luck or you're not getting anything you can top deck or getting these big flips off the top, you're just handing the win over to someone else at that point.
No, and exactly. That happens all the time where you see a situation where, I mean, there's people that say, oh, well, I really want to get rid of that thing because it's stopping my Yuriko. Yeah, I get it, but like it's also shutting down this guy and he's in a much better position to win than you are. And just being able to look at that and go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like not playing a stacks piece just for the sake of playing a stacks piece. Like, oh, I'm gonna play this stacks piece that just makes it to where like if I ever come across a monocolored deck, they're just gonna win. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you don't just slam, like if you're playing you know, I don't know, let's say you're playing some deck that's playing Blood Moon type of effects, and then you pull up to a table against a Magda, and then you just drop a Blood Moon, you've pretty much just handed that to the Magda. So you have to be smart about when you're putting these cards down and like what you're doing at the table. Like I almost never will fully tap out, even if I could be like, well, I'll just cast her and I don't have any mana held up. It's like, no, I will hold mana up. I would rather wait an extra turn just potentially to get my Zerg plan online, or I would rather wait another turn and just see what happens. But I'm going to hold up some interaction. I'm going to hold up some counter spells. I'm going to hold up, you know, whatever. Right. And I'm just going to wait and I'm going to see what happens. And if I need to interact, I will. And if I don't, then cool. I still have this card and I get to play another round. Whereas some people would just be like, well, this helps me. And then they do it. And then it's like, well, does it? Because you just lost. Like your game is over. Like if you're not doing things that are increasing your odds of winning, what are you doing? Right. Like, and I get that. Like when you're new, that's totally different. Like I understand, like with new people, you just don't know what you don't know. And so like, you can't really get mad at somebody for not knowing. Like right. I'm not mad at that person. And same thing, if you're new to the game and you're like, oh, I really like this thing, and you're playing it like it's a casual deck, but it's cEDH, I'm not going to get mad at you at that. I'm going to go, oh, okay, you just need to learn more. Like, right. That's okay. And I can help you with that. Like, I'll be like, hey, like, you know, this is kind of what we're looking at. But when you've been playing it for a long time and you've played in a lot of games and you kind of ask somebody, like, how's your record with the deck? And they're like, it's not really doing what I wanted to do. You think you should try something different? Not necessarily a different deck, but you think you should play the deck a little differently? And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, okay.
Or you could just look at the deck and go, that fucking sucks.
Yeah.
You can do that too.
Yeah.
But I think
I just want to take it, and then I just want to hand them like Italian and be like, this is going to teach you patience.
Yeah.
Learn this, then you can have this back. Yeah. Put your toys away, and then you can have your tablet.
All right. Well, I think kind of got it onto the Yuriko spiel there for a little bit, but and you know, I
know we shit on Magda. Sorry, I didn't cut you off either. I know we shit on Magda, but I will never fucking play Yuriko ever. Don't even like if we fucking white elephant that, I will concede. Yeah, that's probably the only situation in which I'll play it. If I draw it on a white elephant and the whole time I'm over there, I'll just fucking cry.
Oh my god!
I don't even know if I want to win.
Now I know I need to build it.
Yeah,
and it's nothing but the biggest stuff. Like we're gonna put Eldrazi in there.
We play Omniscience. We play Peer into the Abyss. That's what I want to do. I want to cast Peer into the Abyss and let somebody fucking deflecting swat it to them and just win the game.
I love that feeling though.
Fucking stupid. Excuse my language. Sorry for all you out there. Put in the comment section about how good Yuriko is.
Please. So I guess kind of moving on, our number 6. This is, I feel like, a newer deck that started picking up some steam in the year. I think it's actually positioned pretty good.
Can I guess?
Yeah, you can guess.
Glorb?
No.
Damn it.
No. Someone in our play group plays it.
Hang on. Someone in our play group plays it.
Yeah.
Oh, the Jesus Christ, Rogthras?
Rogthras.
Okay.
Yep. So we are in Timur colors now, being red, green, and blue with Rograk, Son of Rograk, and Thrasios Triton Hero. So this is actually our first Rograk deck that we're going to be talking about today, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, this is one that I feel like really started kind of picking up steam towards the end of the year. I think people were trying to really figure it out. Especially following Dockside plan, original game plan would have been Dockside, like Timur Sabertooth type things. But, this deck still takes advantage of things like the Kennen Basalt, generates just a ton of mana with doing things like the Earth. Like at times, if people are like on the Earthcraft type lines with like Shrieking Drake or things like that, we were talking about Hullbreaker earlier on, just being able to generate a bunch of mana that way, and then like eventually just like sinking it all into Thrasios and trying to formulate a game plan from there. What are your thoughts on this deck?
This is actually really interesting. So I honestly think that the issues that Rog Sai has are the opposite of what like Rogthras has. I think that Rogthras's issue is more removal versus like counters and stuff, whereas I think that Rog Sai is more susceptible to like counters versus removal. Like you don't really care about having Silas around. Rograk's cool, but like you're gonna sack him anyways. It doesn't really need to be chilling there. Most of the stuff that you're gonna win with is like sorceries, like Adnaz, and you're gonna try and Necro, or you're gonna, what I mean, like it's stuff to where people can hit it with counters. Mm-hmm. Whereas this kind of took all that out of there, and we're like, we're gonna play a ton of creatures, so you can play around counter magic a lot better. But you just have to be aware of removal, and I don't know. So I think that it's a really good deck, honestly. Yeah. And like I don't have anything really bad to say like I did about Yuriko with this deck. I think it's fine. This is the right way to play big creatures. Like just fucking Hullbreaker horror that actually does something, not just fucking Shadow Mortality like rotting in your hand.
Don't go back to that. We got to keep on this.
Yeah,
we're talking a different deck now.
Yeah.
Can't let
I think this deck really
I'm not gonna
lines
let
up,
you relapse.
I think this deck lines up well against Yuriko. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, and you talked about removal, and like obviously with any of these decks that are going more of the either combat focus, creature combo focus, whatever it is, like you are always going to run into that problem of like what happens when you have removal. Mm-hmm. But then again, we also have to look back and think of the format that we're playing too, mm-hmm. where at most sometimes these decks, regardless of the color combination that we're playing in, there might only be like 4 spots of removal.
Yeah.
And so while there might be more access within certain colors to do things, if you're looking at black with like dismembers and things like that, red's got, even though not a lot of people are playing it, this deck plays it, but like Lightning Bolt. I think Rending Volley can sometimes be a really good card to include in decks. I've tested it out before. Having then the blue ones, like as far as like Chain of Vapor, Psych Rift, into the Flood Maw, things like that. Your white, obviously, like Swords to Plowshare, Path. But you're not playing all of those obviously in one deck, and even the decks that play 5 colors, like the deck we're about to talk about after this one, and my baby, but like I'm only playing like maybe Abrupt Decay, Swords, Into the Flood Maw, and Psych Rift, and that might be it.
I'm trying to think. I think Inzer I play as far as removal, and I don't even know like instant speed removal. Let's go with that. But I play a channel ability with like the Jesus Christ, what is that card called? The enchantment from Kamigawa.
Is it? It's not Touch the
Spirit Realm.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. So like I play that, which is technically removal. I play Swords, Path. I play Into the Flood Maw, Chain of Vapor, Psych Rift.
Yeah.
Do I play any other removal pieces? I don't think so. So technically, I would be walking around with like 6 slots in the deck that are like instant speed removal. Technically,
Right.
And even then, like, it's so I mean yeah. But even then, like, I play a lot more counters than I do removal.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And so like a deck like this, especially with it being mostly creature based, whether that is, you're playing like some of the other lines I've seen in this, like a Cloudstone Curio line with Rograk and Cloud of Fairies. Unless if the Cloudstone just sticks and then you don't have any other counter magic or removal that is creature specific, they're probably going to start going off and creating infinite mana that way. Same thing with the Hullbreaker lines and the the mana that it produces. And then eventually, like, I don't know if this deck necessarily plays Valley of Floodcaller. It could. So like if you start bouncing your own rocks back to hand and you have Valley Floodcaller out and you're starting to have to cast your non-creature spells to return spells back to the hand of your opponent or something like that, you could probably do that. The Lightning Bolt line with like looping the Eternal Witness and Lightning Bolt. Yeah, you can get rid of the Lightning Bolt, but if you can't answer the EWIT, it's just going to get the Lightning Bolt back. So what's the point in even wasting a counter on it at that point? So I think this deck has a lot of versatility in it. It produces a ton of mana. Has some interesting cards that it can play with too. And I think another really good include for this deck is crop rotation. A lot of people have been hyping up how good crop rotation is right now in the format. As far as, if the deck is wanting to grab a Cradle or an Emergent Zone, the Talon Gates of Madara. I don't know if this deck necessarily plays like the is it Minamo, School of Water's Edge?
I don't know if it does or not.
I guess it depends if you want to build it a lot more like One Ring. I don't specific, but
that would be kind of hard, wouldn't it? Though, because like
I think so.
You're not really untapping; you're just bouncing it back to hand. I don't know if it would take you a lot more steps. I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know.
So like I think this is a good deck that even takes advantage of whatever lands it's putting in to the deck.
Sorry, dude. I feel bad interrupting you all the time.
No, you're good. I kind of expect this one to still kind of stay in the middle of the pack. Even though it wasn't on my list of like top 5 by the end of the year or whatever, I think it's going to probably stay about where it's at right now.
Well, and I think that's one of the big benefits anyways with partner decks in general is the fact that you have an extra card in your hand technically. Like just the ability to have like something, it's kind of one of them tricky things where like Rog's Sai obviously performs better. And I think part of the reason for that is more people play that deck. But I think that you have this extra card in your hand with Thrasios that is, I mean, it's an infinite mana sink. It's essentially your combo, your outlet in the zone. You have Rograk, which again, it's just another outlet that you can loop around with, like Displace Your Kitten, or not Displace Your Kitten. Well, I guess no, ignore me. But with good lord, Hullbreaker. There we go. Sorry. Yeah. But it's already there for you to use if you need it. If you need it to be like mana, you can use it. Which I don't know if there's as many situations where it would be mana besides like free counters and like stuff like Jessica's Will, because like a lot of the black like mana producer like ritual type effects are going to be, I feel like, more for like you're going to see it more in like the color black versus like in like red or you're not going to be snacking him necessarily in those colors. But I mean, he's just an extra card in there, so I think it's just a good deck. I don't think that we're going to see it really go anywhere, and I think that if for some reason Timna does end up taking a pretty good hit at some point and Rograk just gets unscathed, I think that this deck could come out of nowhere because a lot of people are already going to have a lot of pieces for Thrasios anyways, and they'll probably just slam Ronda in the zone and they'll be like, let's do this. But I don't know. I mean, they're not, I don't know. Or, well, I guess technically you would probably see more blue farm pilots like switch to that, but and then just have to add in green, essentially. Just pull the Timna, add green, you're good to go. But I still just think that it would be, I don't know. I think that you're going to see, I think you'll see this deck around for a while.
Yeah.
The only one thing that I do think this deck suffers from is that some of the lines can be a little confusing. So it's not necessarily like new player friendly, but once you figure it out, you're good. It's kind of like something like how I place sit this. Like when you first look at it, it's like, I don't really understand what I'm doing. Once you've been through it a couple times, then you start seeing cards and you're like, okay, this is a combo piece, this is a combo piece. Oh, this combos with this. Okay, cool, I got it. And then at that point, it's just timing. And I think I want to say that that's one of the only bad things about something like this is that, man, I just love having the silency type of effects in white where you can just almost ensure that you're good. Like, it's not necessarily having more win cons that to me feels important. It's finding that opening to be able to win and it be protected. And I think that that's the one thing that this deck kind of lacks. Like, you don't have access to the Teferi. You don't have access to Abolisher, Silence, Ranger Captain, anything like that. So it is a little bit risky when you decide you're going to go for the win. You have to just kind of like full send it. But at the end of the day, like I said, you're not really looking at counters necessarily. Right. It's more just interaction that you got to worry about. So I think it's good.
Well, and I think if players did want to resolve like that kind of issue, you know, I feel like within those colors, I wouldn't necessarily go the defense grid route because then that's a card that you can kind of throw the game and like anyone can win on top of once that slams down and resolves. But like you do have access to things like Allosaurus Shepherd, you know, where at least your green spells can't be countered. And it can't be countered. For a 1-drop, that's not bad. You know, I don't think lists are playing that. Same thing with Vexing Shusher. You're playing the Allosaurus Shepherd? You're playing Allosaurus Shepherd?
Yeah.
In what?
Sit this.
Oh, I forgot you played that deck. But you know, Vexing Shusher, I play that in flubs. It's a little bit different. But I think that is a card that, one, it can be countered. It has the hybrid mana, so it is a little bit easier to cast. You can make any spell on the stack uncounterable. So like even if you're trying to like maybe you don't have the interaction, but someone else does, and in order to save a win, you make their counter spell like uncounterable. So that way, you know, it has a lot of flexibility in that way. And then like I've seen Veil Summer, I think a lot in some of these lists too. So I mean, I think that even if the first two cards that I listed there aren't necessarily cards that most Rog Thras players would use, that last one in particular to kind of protect their own wins, like when they're ready to go off, I can cast the Veil Summer, I can protect this, and I can do what I need to.
We also have like deflecting SWAT and other stuff. You have access to that too. So I mean, it is good. Like I said, it's just, I don't know. Like I said, I don't have anything bad to say about this deck. I think the only bad thing I have to say about this deck is that we just all realized that Flubs is the better teamer deck.
I can't wait to get that on camera though and see what happens with it. So that looks like our bottom part of the top 10.
Yep.
And you know, that might be all we can kind of get at today, but do you have like kind of our, you know, obviously Yuriko, Magda, like those things that we talked about throughout that, but you know, what are your thoughts on what we have covered as far as the 6 through 10 spots?
I understand why I understand why the decks that are there are those decks. I think that some of them are positioned pretty well right now. I think some of them, they can be good decks. It's just getting it into the right hands. So, and again, like there might be a little bit of bias because a lot of people are playing those decks, whereas like some of these other decks, you're not going to see as many pilots. But again, like when you start to look at cEDH, it is going to kind of narrow the field of what you're seeing because people want to play the best stuff, or they're going to want to play stuff that they think is going to convert into wins. So I understand that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a strong list. And I think that it makes a lot of sense because that's a lot of what I'm seeing right now anyways. Like you're seeing, again, like especially for our meta, but I'm seeing a lot of I'm seeing Rog Thras. I'm seeing the Yuriko. We saw Tivit. We've got an Agila pilot in our meta, and we've got a Magda pilot. So I mean, we've seen all 5 of those in our own meta too. So I mean, it makes sense that they're converting. Like they're popular decks, people are playing them, so it makes sense that they're going to be in that bottom 5. I've got a sneaking suspicion based off of what was in the bottom 5, what's going to be in the top 5, but we can always cover that at part 2.
Yeah, and I think as far as where we're at today, we'll probably have to pick up on the part 2 later on, but I think that we pretty much know what is really rounding out the format at the top. And I'm actually kind of excited to, you know, when we do get into the part 2, talk about the very first one because I'm not gonna get into it right now, but it is my love.
Bring you a change of drawers.
I might have to. Aside from that, I'm kind of looking through here on the EDH top 16, and I think that if we're going to see some changes over the next few months, I'm kind of looking over, some of these that are placing, like almost edging out some of these. I'm looking at, like, there's Derevi, Stella Lee, Atraxa is up here. Glarb, even though, obviously it's not in the top 10, that's still a brand new deck. So, like, like in particular, I really want to see where Derevi and Glarb end up standing. And I think that those are going to be two decks that kind of push out, especially like the Yuriko and then the Gila probably. I could see those two coming off eventually, and then those two kind of slotting in based on where we're at right now. So,
yeah.
Other than that, I think that is at least our 6 through 10, and we will have to pick the rest up on another day. But aside from that, if you all have any comments or maybe rebuttals or want to defend some of these decks that we talked about today, let us know in the comments. A lot of these things, some of it we're kind of spitballing and guessing on because we're not used to. But if someone out there is really passionate about Yuriko, tell Blake he sucks.
Yeah. Well, and we've mentioned this in another video, but we're just two guys from Kentucky. Like, we don't necessarily have the best takes unless it's about Yuriko. So just, feel free to leave something in the comment section. And again, just let us know if we're right. Let us know if we're wrong. Let us know what deck you're playing. Let us know what decks you're excited to see in the new year. And also, we just want to say, like, thank you for watching and just listening to two bums from Kentucky talk about cEDH.
And as always,
go play cEDH.